question I can tip, but we can bring.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, however you want to do it, it's fine. Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, let me adjust here. Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our, what month is it? October episode of Frames. We have a special guest joining us today, but before we get started, I want to introduce Sabria Shah and Aisha Darbo as our new Frames coordinators. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed to have them join the ALIM team, and they are both alumni, and I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves, but we're really excited to have them on board and to be the new coordinators for this monthly program that we have, usually the second to last Wednesday of every month. So I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aisha Darbo. I am an alumni who attended the summer program in 2019.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Sabria Shah. I attended ALIM in 2016, alhamdulillah, and I'm excited to join the ALIM Frames team, inshallah. I'm currently also a student at Taysir Seminary. So I'm definitely looking forward to these conversations and to being able to serve Adam, because I've benefited so much from Adam, alhamdulillah. So I'm excited to be able to get involved and give back, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sabria and Aisha. I think there were a couple announcements before we get started with Dr. Abdullah and Ustadh Ubaydullah, inshallah.
Inshallah. So I think we can bismillah. So we have a few announcements. You would like to announce that our summer program, which is Adam's kind of flagship main program, we've opened up registration, alhamdulillah. So if you are interested in attending for next year, the location is still TBA, so we will announce that shortly. But the dates are July 16th through August 7th. And you can go to adamprogram.com for more information on how to register and to learn more information about the program. And we can put that in the chat, inshallah, so you can click the link there. And we also would like to announce, if you don't know, that we actually have a monthly book club discussion, and they're actually really beneficial. Ustadh Ubaydullah joins, and different people from Adamni, but also people who haven't been involved in Adam get involved. And so this month we're actually reading The Agenda to Change Our Condition, which I believe is by Imam Zaid, translated by Imam Zaid, and so Imam Zaid Shakir. So you can register for that at adamprogram.com/book club. And that is the last Wednesday of each month. So next Wednesday, inshallah. You can join that. It's a live discussion. So, if you haven't read it yet, you can come. If you have read the book, you can come in and join in the discussion and hear from other Muslims across the country on different topics. It's not always religious books. Sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's nonfiction. And so it's just a really great communal space, inshallah. So we will also put that link in the chat. And the link again is adamprogram.com/book club. And for tonight's frames discussion, I'm really excited for tonight's topic, inshallah. This is something that I think is going to be really interesting and really, it'll be a really beneficial discussion, I think, for our Muslim community to learn from. And so the topic for tonight is Muslims and Islamic Values, a discussion on Islam and Conservatism. And we will have Ustadh Ubaydullah and Dr. Abdullah Bin Hamid Ali join us, and they'll be in discussion. So feel free to add any comments, any questions that you might have. Inshallah, we will get those addressed as well. And this is kind of an open space for them to discuss, but also for you to discuss as the audience. So just tune in, add any comments, questions, concerns that you might have into the comment section, inshallah, and we will get that addressed. I will go ahead and introduce our speakers, our guests. So Ustadh Ubaydullah is no stranger to Adam. He is the Adam's first scholar in residence. He converted to Islam while in high school, and upon conversion, Ustadh Ubaydullah began studying some of the foundational books of Islam under the private tutelage of local scholars, while simultaneously pursuing a degree in journalism from Columbia. And since then, he has studied at Chicagoland's Institute of Islamic Education in Tarim, Yemen, and at Al Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, where he is the first African American to graduate from its Sharia program. Ustadh Ubaydullah also instructs with the Ta'deef Collective and Inner Sunni Muslim Action Network at times. And as the ALIM Scholar in Residence, he is a core instructor at the ALIM Summer Program, which we just announced. So if you are interested in attending that, if you have not attended it, or if you want to go back, inshallah, and attend it, do look into that, inshallah. And he teaches the history of Islam in America, history of Islamic law, Shama'in, and aphorisms of Ibn al-Ta'inna, along with other courses. And our other guest for tonight is Dr. Abdullah Bin Hamid Ali, who is a professor at Zaytuna College. So Dr. Abdullah Ali is a scholar of Islamic law with field specialties in Islamic theology, as well as race and Blackness studies and Muslim history. His research interests include the interconnection between law and identity formation, comparative Islamic law, and Islam's role in the modern world. At Zaytuna College, Dr. Ali teaches jurisprudential principles, family law, inheritance law, commercial law, prophetic tradition, creedal theology, and Islamic virtue ethics. He received his bachelor's or al-Ijazah al-Ulya from Al-Qarawiyyin University in Sharia in 2001. He received both his master's and his PhD from the Graduate Theological Union in 2012 and 2016, respectively. And prior to his post at Zaytuna College, Dr. Ali was a chaplain at State Correctional Institute in Chester, Pennsylvania from 2002 to 2007. And his PhD thesis, titled The Negro in Afro-Arabian Muslim Consciousness, demonstrates the interplay between conceptions and perceptions of race in constructing class differences. It is an example of how race taxonomies are constructed and employed to impress upon people's psychological states and socio-cultural sensibilities. Aims to uncover how indigenous Black African Muslims responded to challenges to their humanity and agency by the Arab co-religionists who saw themselves as ethnically and culturally superior to their brethren. And Dr. Ali is fluent in Arabic, and he joined Zaytuna College in 2007. So we're really excited to get into tonight's program. Ustadh Ubaydullah, welcome, and Dr. Abdullah, welcome. Assalamu
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think you're muted. You're muted, Dr. Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you? How is your family?
Alhamdulillah. How about yours?
Alhamdulillah. Everybody's well, man. We're enjoying some unseasonably warm weather for this time of year in Chicago. And throughout the Midwest, so it's hard to be in a bad mood when it's, late October, 75 degrees, the windows are open, the kids are back in school. I was telling somebody yesterday that when I'm taking my kids to school, I feel like my house is thanking me. Thank you. Please, give me some time to recuperate. Give me some time to recover from these children tearing me apart. So lots of good. How are your students at Zaytuna?
Alhamdulillah. All is well, mashallah.
Very good. Well, I want to get right into it. We're about 10 minutes late. First off, I want to say, and I've said this to you privately, but I think it warrants saying publicly, I really respect you among all of the public intellectuals kind of in the Muslim community, or speaking, teaching, presenting in the Muslim space. I think you're distinguished by many things, but one of the things that distinguishes you is that, one, you write, you actually write, mashallah, we have produced many great preachers, and we've produced many great teachers, but people that actually put their thoughts into writing. I think a special commendation is due to them, because when you write, you're concretizing ideas and you're putting them out there, and you don't have the liberty of being able to defend them or offer qualifications or explain or extrapolate. You're just there on the merit of what you've written, and you regularly do that. So I want to commend you for that. And then secondly, which is probably a good segue into my first real topic of discussion this evening, you don't have any qualms with making your views known, right? You'll make use of, whether it is a social media platform, whether it is a speech at the conference that, mashallah, you've led the effort in convening, whether it is something that you've written, you make your views known, and you are always prepared to deal with the criticism that might attend those views. So first of all, I just want to give you props for that, for being intellectually rigorous and also being courageous. MashaAllah. Forgive me. I've eaten all day.
Ubaydullah is always still Ubaydullah. MashaAllah. No problem.
Among the things for which you've become quite known in some, parts of the community is your conservative political views that I don't think you understand as simply political views, but, kind of a conservative iteration of Islamic values, Islamic principles that, dovetail very nicely. I'm sure you would understand it with a lot of mainstream conservative views. This is something that when many Muslims encounter a Muslim of your level of scholarship, a Muslim who is a Black American, a Muslim that has parents that come from the Nation of Islam, I think this is something that throws them off.
It puzzles.
It puzzles them a little bit. How have you experienced that?
Well, I mean, the experience of it, it varies. It varies from just from getting just simply dismissed, right, as a right-wing quack, right, to others expressing their just shock, their sheer disbelief that, I've had people say to me things like, you teach as a tuna, and then also, of course, the steady embrace, people with much more balance and more reasonable, who actually appreciate nuance, right? People who expressed or constantly express their appreciation for, sort of just standing my ground and, trying my best to clarify to people like where I'm coming from and why I say or do the things that I do, so it's a mixed reaction naturally, and I do think that one of the main reasons that it becomes a challenge for many people is because the community on the national level, I would say, is, we're about extremes. We're always at polar extremes. 2000, we were pro-conservative, right? We wanted to be, most Muslims who actually were involved in politics, and there weren't really as many Muslims today back then who actually were concerned with politics, but for those who actually engaged in politics, and we would say generally among the quote unquote immigrant community, that they were, they voted for George
Bush and Lieberman.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So they didn't see any problems with conservatism back then.
I'm not Bush and Lieberman, Bush and Cheney, because they voted against Gore and Lieberman. Excuse me.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm talking about W. Bush, George W. Bush, right? So back in prior to 9/11, right? So everyone was there. Well, not everyone, but a large contingent of the community was there, right? And prior to that, our community was, you probably witnessed this as well, that the mosque of going community, the preachers from the pulpits and everyone, or most people would say, just to be fair, who actually was preaching from the pulpit, largely saw a dichotomy between being American and being a Muslim. Many would go as far as to say that, to vote is to validate, to participate in the process is to validate, to validate an unrighteous, unholy, godless country, right, which doesn't implement Sharia, does not acknowledge Islam as the truth, and the only options that you have are either to remain and give da'wah or make hijrah back to Muslim lands. Right? And I remember I wrote a piece back then called "Are You American or Are You Muslim?" It wasn't very popular, but I know my cousin, some other people actually they saw it, and right, and
you tell them to lend some support,
Yeah. So I wrote that, because again, I saw this idea that there had to be some dichotomy, which I thought was problematic. Why does it have to be this or that? That people coming from Muslim countries can say that they're Egyptian or Moroccan or they're Saudi, and saying that you're American doesn't mean that you endorse American foreign policy. Just that means that okay.
What's interesting about what I find really interesting about America in terms of where it exists conceptually in our consciousness is that when we think about home, I know many people that would take umbrage at being referred to as American. Right, because there's something jingoistic about that. There's something cheaply patriotic about that. There's something love it or leave it about that. But they will rep their neighborhood, Brooklyn, South Side.
That's right. West Philly,
Oakland,
West Philly.
They will wear hats. They will wear shirts. They will use all of the colloquialisms associated with the place, because when they talk about Brooklyn or the South Side of Chicago or Baltimore or West Philly or Midtown Memphis, shout out to Midtown Memphis, Midtown Memphis or Oakland, they're not talking about anything political.
Right.
They're just talking about a shared sensibility.
Right.
A shared subjectivity between them and people of that locality that they all identify as home. Right. My question to them always, why can't someone have that same kind of, affinity toward America largely?
Right.
Why can't somebody have the same, when somebody says America, they're not necessarily endorsing any political party or policy. Right. They're just saying, this is my home.
Yeah. And we remember too that this actually wasn't only an immigrant issue, right? This was also the same situation with Black Americans, and that I come up through that, like you mentioned, that my family coming through the Nation of Islam, but also the Sunnis, in my community, that there is brothers coming from the Black Panther Party and others, Muslim, and Kafir was just like another word for white man, and so it was.
Wait, Kafir doesn't mean white man, no.
Yeah. This is like the kufar. It's like so. Right. He said, I'm Sunni. It's the way the Sunnis got over there, and so every time a white person becomes Muslim, then you're all of a sudden you're suspicious. Maybe he's a Fed or whatever, And so there was a deep dislike, right, for the country, right. People felt like anywhere else other than America had to be better, right. That's the sense, and that was the culture that I came up in, and a lot of us came up in that particular culture, right. So even if a person like Imam W.D. Muhammad, as we know, him to actually come out and praise America, or to say this is our home, and go to recite al-Fatiha at the opening of Congress or something like that. Oh, WD he has to be with the FBI, right? So.
But see, this is my dilemma with that, and this will bring us right back to discussing Muslims and conservatism.
Yeah.
I do think that there is, because what we're describing in kind of a roundabout, circuitous way is that the Black American Muslim community, at least, has always been a community that defied domestication. It's not, Islam among Black Americans represents a countervailing force. It's
Right.
not something that can ever be set within the American political, cultural, or even economic sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
You talk to partners and say, man, you could do this much more efficiently with a business license at a storefront. But why would I do that? I'm a tajir mutajawil.
Right.
So, so I guess one of the things that challenges me about your conservatism, even before I look at it in terms of how consistent are conservative values with Islam, is this is just such an American way of talking about politics or talking about race or talking about class or economics. It's just so American. And I think for a very long time, I thought of Islam as being something else.
Right. No, and that's an important discussion to have. But let me clear things up to start for starters. Is that when you start talking about my conservatism, that we're not talking about realistically a dedication or commitment to a political party, right? And this is a point that I constantly make to people, is that I've only voted 2 times in my entire life, right? In the national elections. The first time I voted was for Obama in his first term, right? Now that wasn't a problem for anyone because blacks are largely Democrats anyway, right? And I think that culturally, Black Muslims are progressives, right? Culturally, right? More so, right?
I think Black Muslims are conservatives culturally, but go ahead.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that because I'm looking look what's going on right now. I mean, there was a whole lot of talk about tyranny and totalitarianism when Trump was in office, but nobody's complaining about tyranny and totalitarianism now. Why?
Yeah, I know.
Why? Because the only time we complain about American foreign policy or tyranny is when a Republican is in office. Even though most of our problems have not been caused by Republicans, they've been caused by Democrats, right? Because we've been brainwashed into believing that the real enemy is the Republican. And so, but when you actually look at our cities and consider who's been managing our cities for the last few decades, they've been all Democrats. So if we talk about the cities, we have problems of these major pockets of poverty and crime and things like that. Republicans are not managing these places. These are Democrats managing these places, right? So, but we have this tendency to blame all of our problems on the Republicans when most of our problems are actually a result of Democrat policies. But we, at the same time, we embrace the Democrats because the Democrats, they talk nice to us, right? We're on your side. We're going to defend you, right? Yeah, and it's the same thing.
But I do see, and I realize that at Zaytuna, mashallah, they take very seriously a traditional education. So I know you study mantiq, and I know mantiq is taught there, logic is taught there. I do see in that, though, a bit of a non sequitur, because to suggest that because the cities are run by Democratic elected officials, the cities are bad, to somehow posit republicanism as kind of an alternative to what happens in America's urban areas.
Well, we never tried it. Well, how would we know we never tried it? You see, so again, I'm not here to advocate for somebody joining the Republican Party. Glenn, like I stated, I'm far less committed to the party than I am to protecting my religious rights, right? That I believe are more protected through the Republican Party than through the Democrat Party, especially right now today, right? Go ahead.
Why would you? And I know when you say that, you're saying so very deliberately and very thoughtfully. I've heard people say all kinds of things about Dr. Abdullah Bin Hamid Ali, but nobody has ever said that man is not thoughtful. That man is careless. That man, he just spouts, carelessly off at his mouth, saying things. No. Everybody knows that you're a very deliberate, very careful scholar. So when you say, I feel like the Republican Party protects my religious values and rights more effectively than the Democratic Party. I know that you say so in conscience. Explain to us, why would you say that?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that the Constitution itself is a very valuable doctrine. Document. Document. It's a very valuable document. And the Constitution largely, in my opinion, is not necessarily in contradistinction or a contradiction to Islamic values, at least most of it. And one of the two most important amendments in the Constitution are the first and second. Right. Now, of course, some can argue 14th, 15th, 13th, as well with regard to slavery and voting rights and other things like that. But these are the most primary of rights. You start talking about the right to follow your conscience, the freedom of thought, the freedom to express yourself religiously, right? And then you start talking about the right to bear arms, right? And meaning to protect yourself and protect your property and your family, right? The Republican Party, for the most part, has proven to be in favor of preserving those rights, right? The Democrat Party is threatening those rights, and they're threatening those rights in many different ways. They threaten their rights when they demand from you to not follow your conscience, or they demand to you that you have to utilize special pronouns for certain people, and you have to change your ideas or rewire your brain when it comes to basic biology with regard to man and woman. That when they're demanding from you to just utilize certain type of verbiage anytime you speak about something, and you can get in trouble for basically just speaking your mind and just expressing a different opinion, right? Furthermore, the Democrat Party, the progressives, progressive wing of the Democrat Party, that they largely see minorities, quote unquote, as inferior. Right? They don't say it that way. They don't speak of it that way, but they see them as inferior. Why would they? How would they not see us as inferior when they actually, they're constantly telling us that we need extra help. Right, that we're so fragile that we have to walk on eggshells with Black people. That Black people don't like this, they don't like that. So we have to make sure we protect them from hearing bad things, bad news, or criticism. Or they start to tell us that Black people they can't be successful educationally. So we need the affirmative action. They need. We need to get rid of the SAT exams. We need to, you understand, we have to move all these standards so we can accommodate all these Black people because their brains are different than ours, right? So we have to make sure, whereas the Republican Party, that people are telling you, listen, you're equal to me. We're the same. You can do anything I can do, right? Where the Democrats are telling us that, no, you can't, right? You can't do it. That's why we are trying to make everything easy for you.
But okay, now I want to separate a couple of issues.
Yeah.
One, I think it is true that you have a number of Muslims that are quite progressive. I work with ALIM, the American Learning Institute for Muslims, and we're regularly engaging Muslims on college campuses, and many of them are very progressive in their views with regard to gender, with regard to sexuality, with regard to transsexuality, and with regard to race, right? I think that exists. But we segued into this, portion of the conversation talking about kind of traditional Black American allegiance to the Democratic Party. Now, until very, very recently, I would say that Black Americans were mostly socially conservative with regard to issues around sexuality.
Not completely. I think that, with regard to homosexuality, yes.
Okay.
But not with regard to sexuality overall. We've been just as promiscuous, if not more promiscuous at times.
Sure. But with regard to homosexuality and transsexuality.
Yes.
Right? But I think the allegiance to the Democratic Party politically in terms of the black vote has always been about issues of race, number one, and issues of government subsidies. You know, the Republican Party has always, you know, driven a very hard line about reducing taxation, right? And usually what is slashed is never the military spending.
But that's a mutual thing. That goes cross party. That goes cross party. You know, Democrats don't object to any military spending. They don't object to that. They fund Israel. You know, every single
election. Well, but I'm saying it's not military spending, nor is it all of the subsidies from which the vast majority of economically depressed Americans benefit. You know, I mean, you name it. But it's always, at least rhetorically, spoken of as welfare queens. Everybody remembers the.
But who speaks of it that? Who speaks of it that way? Is it the Republicans or the media speaks of it that way?
I'm not sure.
Right. You're talking about the media speaking of it.
No. We can get. I mean,
you're talking about progressive media and media.
I can remember some specifics though. Like in the Bush campaign in '92, talking about light sentencing and that Democratic elected judges, or not judges, but city officials and Democratic congressmen were not tough enough on crime. And they ran the ads about Willie Horton.
I remember that. Yeah, that was Bush one, right?
The Willie Horton ads. But you also had Hillary Clinton talking about super predators.
That's right.
Around the same time. So I guess what I'm saying is I completely, up in my own point. I'm hoist by my own petard, as Shakespeare would say. I'm not saying, I'm not saying that Democratic messaging has been altogether different, but it does seem that in the messaging of the Republican Party, there has been something of a dog whistle. So even when we talk about affirmative action, and you mentioned affirmative action, everyone knows that the single biggest beneficiary of affirmative action has been white women. White women have benefited mightily from affirmative action. But when we talk about affirmative action, we tend to talk about it as a black issue.
Well, what about welfare? So you can say the same thing as well. Welfare, the biggest beneficiaries of welfare are whites, right? Yeah, exactly right. But again, I think that you're confusing something here. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I think that what often we miss is how strong the messaging is and the alliances are between the media and the Democrat Party, right? And I mean social media as well, and that all become very transparent right now. Anybody with eyes can see it. That the image makers, those who control the imagery, largely when we talk about the legacy media, that these are those who are allied with the Democrat Party, who are allied with the intelligence community as well, right? And they have their messaging that they pervade. So if Republicans are opposed to raising taxes, I don't see why that's a problem. If Republicans are opposed to continuing to dish out more welfare subsidies to people, I personally don't see why that is a problem, especially considering the fact that most of those people who actually are beneficiaries of the welfare system are white, right? So how does it become a black issue if most of the beneficiaries of welfare are white, right? But this is what I'm saying is that the messaging that we received has made us believe that it's the Republicans who actually are targeting black people, right? And that and all of our problems are a result of them. But we don't realize too at the same time when we start talking about, if we even focus on this one issue of welfare, if we stay stuck on that for a second, that welfare, by saying that black people will be disadvantaged if welfare benefits are removed, right? Or that black people are going to be disadvantaged if we stipulate voter ID laws, right? That fundamentally, if I don't find anything more racist than that, myself personally.
I think
Because hear me out, right? Hear me out. I don't find anything more racist than that, because fundamentally what it does, it paints all or at least the majority of Black people as poor people, right? Who need financial help, when in fact, that the poor, those people actually qualify as poor in the Black community. It fluctuates between 20 and 25%, right, of the population, which means, up to between 75 to 80% of Blacks are either middle class or rich, right? So most Blacks are not poor to begin with, right? But this messaging gives the impression that most Black people are poor. And I've actually met Muslims who are from different countries, non-Black Muslims, who actually believe this, is that most Black people are poor. I was like, no, most Black people are not poor, right? But why? One last thing is that so it paints the picture. It projects us as being we're a bunch of poor people. We need help, right? First and foremost, constantly, There's a second point I wanted to make. I can't remember at the moment, but anyway, hopefully it'll come back. But I think you follow me.
No. But see, I think we were. There's something you mentioned that I want to follow up on. Look, now you can't laugh at me for taking a bite of my bread if you're,
No.
One thing about image making, and I think this is particularly American, is that given the historical legacy of Black people in America, there is a certain, and I'm only using downward. I don't like really upward and downward in terms of positionality, but I think in this case, it's apropos. There is a certain downward facing focus in terms of authenticity, honor, respect, meaning, I think that there is this ethos among Black people that we define our liberty, our freedom, our access, our privilege by what the least of these, to use the biblical language, right? It's almost like, the Black national anthem is "Lift Every Voice and Sing."
Right.
We're not disregarding anyone. We're not, because we know what it is to be disregarded. Systemically, we know what it like, and I'm not talking about contemporarily. I'm talking about what it really means to be disregarded. Right. We know what that is. So there is something that is downward facing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally.
Cultural ethos. Now, and I think in white American cultures, some of them, there is something that is upward facing, right? Yeah. So that even a ruddy faced coal miner in West Virginia somehow agrees or feels inspired by the populism of a man that has a gold toilet. Hold on, I gotta close this door. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Right, there is something in like that has always been bizarre to me. That not that people voted for Donald Trump or were enamored with Donald Trump, that they actually regarded him as someone that could authentically speak to their reality, even though this is someone that has lived a life of great privilege, someone that is known, in fact.
He's a salesman. He's been a salesman his whole life, right? And so he was able to sell himself. Right.
And I think that what you see there is there's something in the white American experience that is it's upward facing in that way. Meaning, it's almost like to put a sharper point on it, even though there are numerically more white people with backgrounds that resemble the rapper Eminem than white people with backgrounds that resemble JFK. Eminem is still inauthentic as a white person.
Right.
Right. That's not what it really
means. But to who? Which white people and which not white people is he inauthentic?
I think like popularly, like they say, I was reading this book about marketing, and they say that there's only 2 products that people use working class images to sell: beer and pickup trucks. Other than that, the imagery is both in print and television. It's mostly middle class and upper middle class imagery, because there's something aspirational there, right? There's something aspirational there. Whereas even though the vast majority of Black people are not poor, as you pointed out, that is still where authenticity lies.
But it's still there, and I would say it has a lot to do with those who control the imagery, right? The messaging, they control the messaging, that this is the messaging that we've been fed, and we are not as critical of it as we need to be, right? I mean, Malcolm X, one of his famous statements was that the media is the most powerful tool in the world. It has the ability to make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses, right? So
but my point, my point about that, my point about that whole thing that I attempted to lay out is that I feel like that connection, not in values, virtues, or a lack thereof, but in concern, that connection with the Masakin, I think that there's a deep resonance there.
I don't think that you'll find any disagreement with people on the right, black conservatives. I don't think you'll find any disagreement there that there's a concern about that. I think that the disagreement, it really is between is about, like, how do you solve the problem, right? The Democrat solution is, pump more money, right, into the neighborhoods. The Republican solution says, teach them how to fish, right? Teach them how to fish rather than just simply.
Where have we ever seen a serious commitment to teach people how to fish? I don't know.
I mean, it's you have to understand that one of the basic principles of conservatism is is small government, right? And there's a strong distrust in government to begin with, because there's a strong distrust in human nature, right? That the human being has to be checked on a constant basis, and you can't just simply rely on people's apparent goodwill and without there being checks and balances, But the bigger government, the more you create government institutions, the more power that you hand over to government and you take out of your own hand, to the extent until there's no more freedom for you, and you just become just pretty much a slave or a servant of the government rather than it being the other way around, right? So that itself is integral to conservative thinking, right? So to say to a person, well, listen, I believe you have potential, right? I believe you can do whatever I'm able to do, right? And we're willing to provide for you the opportunity to do that. And the other way is to say, well, hey, you haven't done too well, and so we'll just simply, don't worry about anything. Just we'll give you a check, and you can just stay the way that you are, and you don't, think anything about any ambitions or any upward movement, etc. Right? So
no. I mean, I think it's. I mean, what comes to mind for me is "Qawlun haqqun yuradu bihi al-batil." It's a true statement.
How so?
It's a true, but what that statement means in Arabic is it's a true statement, but what is sought by it is false.
How so? And what's the evidence that batil is sought by it? What's the evidence?
Because this is completely subjective. But what I hear is I want to help you assume the personal responsibility befitting a citizen of a republic. Right?
Yeah. Okay. And what's wrong with that? And what's wrong with that?
That is that there is no real consideration being given to how my lot became.
No, I disagree with that. I mean, that's only if you focus on
meaning like okay, but we're not starting from a place of neutrality.
Right.
And I'm not. And look. And again, we don't even have to debate the evidence of whether systemic racism exists now or not. I think that question is really unimportant. Personally, my thing is perception is reality. To some, I mean, if perception is reality with regard to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and fi dhanni abdi bi, I'm in the opinion of my servant, and he is al-haq. There's nothing, there's really nothing else real. And certainly with everything else, it's in the perception of the individual.
Right. It is. Perception is reality. And this is why I'm constantly coming back to the image makers, those who control the messaging, right? Because if you misconceive or you misapprehend reality, then your hukum, your judgment about your situation is going to be flawed. It's going to be wrong, right? And if you don't correct that, if you don't understand what is mediating your reality, right? And you're not critical of the mediation itself or the source of that projection, then you're going to constantly be, falling, and you're going to constantly making mistakes over and over and over and over and over, right? Put blame, let's put the blame where it belongs, right? That this is not about, like I stated before, we can talk all day about whether or not we disagree or agree with conservatism. I really don't. Myself personally, it's not about. I'm not on a mission to convert anybody, right? But because I'm not like a political conservative in the way that people imagine that, right? It's just that as a tool, conservatism is a tool for me to achieve my goals, right? So my goals are protecting myself and my interests, right? And I don't see my interests being protected in the Democrat Party at the moment, right? So I see, only thing I see from the Democrat Party is that, okay, if you yourself perhaps have an issue with self-esteem, that the Democrats make you feel good about yourself. They make you feel like as if you're protected, when all along actually your rights actually are being stripped away from you, right? And again, coming back to Malcolm, he warned, right, that this white liberal in particular, is the most diabolical of them all, right? They are very, very crafty at the way that they
I think even dealing with this kind of dichotomous American liberal, American conservative, I would hope, and this might be a vain hope, that dichotomy wouldn't be very significant to Muslims. We're mostly talking about.
I hope it wouldn't, but it is.
But we're mostly talking about values. We're mostly talking about values. And so when you say you feel that conservatism protects your religious values more effectively than liberalism, I definitely do not feel that liberalism protects my religious values more effectively than conservatism. But there are serious religious values when you talk about a certain kind of direct service to the less fortunate, a certain kind of allegiance, right? Ahbib al-masakin wa jalishum. Like one of the things that I think conservatism, it feels, now it sometimes in its most sophisticated guise, it can feel like tough love. Thomas Sowell, Glenn Laurie, Larry Elder, right? It can feel like tough love. At times, though, I do sense this kind of self-hatred and disassociation.
Based upon what? Based upon what statements that they've made? Where is it? What indicates self-hatred in their words?
Because what I don't get, and this is deeply personal. What utility could there be in me sitting in a room full of white American conservatives addressing the lack of work ethic, the laziness, the sexual irresponsibility of my people, and none of them are in the room? How is that? I don't.
Well, again, you're assuming that none of them in the room. Again, you're just they're plenty of black conservatives. They're plenty of black conservatives, but you're assuming that no black people.
No. What I'm saying is this, right? If I mean this sincerely. if Larry Elder or Candace Owens or Thomas Sowell or Glenn
I
Love,
mean, leave like Candace Owens and
these
Larry Elder aside, you know, because they're more pundits.
they're media
Thomas
personalities.
Sowell, yeah, real scholar, right?
You know, if one of them,
Shelby Steele, yes, a real scholar.
Right? And maybe it's just the fact that I don't know their activity, but if there was a real effort to speak these hard truths to Black Americans, and there was a programmatic engagement with those issues, you know, there was mentorship, or there was, you know, just some real programmatic effort being made to engage these social maladies, I would feel that this gives you license to say whatever you want. In fact, we began talking about your parents and talking about, you know, their history with the Nation of Islam. A lot of their views were just straight up Black conservative views.
Well, let me tell you a story. This is my father, Allah Yarhamuh. The story about my father, Allah Yarhamuh. My father was a true believer in Elijah Muhammad. He believed he actually was sent by Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. You know, and it took him a long time to sort of get that out of his system, years, perhaps decades, right, to get that out of his system before he died. I remember one time, and I think I've told this story before, like publicly, you know, that my father used to be a TV repairman, you know, and so I remember one day I visited his shop, and he's watching like one of these crazy reality TV shows, like I think like Maury or something like that, you know. And so he looks at me, he said, Black man goes on TV and humiliates himself in front of the whole world, right? White man, you know, in front of the white man, you know, in front of the whole world. And he says to me, this is my father, right? Nation of Islam in the first resurrection, right? He says to me at the moment, he said, Black man today has no excuse. The Black man today has no excuse not to do better. It wasn't like when I was young, right? This wasn't like, this is my father, right? You know, so, and my mother, similar to that, right? You know, similar to Larhamha, right? So you're talking about people actually went through these experiences, real racism, living under Jim Crow, right? You know, they knew what it was like. They knew what it was like. My mother got kicked out of her house when she was my grandmother's house when she was 17 because she joined the Nation of Islam. You know, and the FBI came to my grandmother's house, you know, questioning my grandmother about my mother's now new allegiance to the Nation of Islam. You know, of course, my mom refused to leave, so my grandmother, she kicked her out, right? You know, right?
No, I only mentioned the Nation of Islam to say that those same conservative views about accountability, responsibility, I don't think that they're inconsistent with love for Black people.
No, they're not. I mean, let me say this. You know,
I'm talking about those things in a room full of people that some of them perhaps do harbor.
Again, I think you're projecting. You know, I mean, you're talking about something that you didn't witness. You're assuming, you know, about like there was nobody there. But anyway, then we can leave that aside. But I think this was important. Is that fundamentally, you mentioned earlier, you know, Jalis al Masakin, right? And the Prophet always something to sit with the Masakin, right? Yeah, and be close to them, right? Right? But the Prophet also said, no person eats anything better, any food better than the food that he makes with his own hand.
Right? Of course.
Right? And the Prophet also he forbade begging, right? And he said, better for you to go out and gather firewood, right? You know, for people to heat up their homes, and for one to stand at the road or stand on the road with their hands out, right?
Of course.
You know? So I don't see how like asking people to be responsible and to develop a work ethic is absent, is deficient of love, right? You know, or we say contrary to prophetic teachings, right? Yeah, because you sit with the poor, sitting with the poor. There's no sort of like, you know, there's
we're just talking about the house of the sa'il and the mahroom, the one that asks and the one that cannot ask.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And also, much of it is in attitude. That's all I was getting at.
Yeah,
but I think again here, there is this subtle generalization that when we talk about Black people or people of color, which is the new in vogue term, right? Somehow we're talking about all of these minority categories, people that are not middle class.
Well, that's a different thing. That's a new thing, and I agree with that. And I actually don't agree with non-Black people using the term colored people, that we're colored people as well, because fundamentally what they've done is they've hijacked the movement,
the cultural relevance that comes with that term.
Right, exactly right. So because those terms were originally legal terms, to be totally honest. You're colored if you were Black or you're Native American or you're mixed with either two or all three, the white, the European, the Native or the Black, right? But nowadays, in order to of course stick it to the man, everybody wants to stick it to the man, because we sort of developed this new ideology where you can know who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed on the basis of just simply knowing the category of person who you're dealing with.
Another question though, how do you respond? And this is a question that I'm asked often, that when Muslims think about their religious values vis-a-vis the American body politic, we're too stuck on sexuality and transgenderism. That we're not, when we say there's things that progressives support that are against my religious values, this is just coded language for homosexuality and transgenderism.
Well, what other things are there? Are they trying to impose upon us, right? They're not trying to impose upon the shirk, right? They may be trying. Some people are trying to impose upon us atheism, right? But there's not a strong, sort of movement, a push in that regard. But there is a strong push to force us to accept, homosexuality and transgenderism, right? And it's a litmus test to determine just how progressive of a Muslim you are. How you understand? So if they were calling us to worship 3 gods or 10 gods, we would also make an issue out of that. But that's not what their main focus is. Their main focus is on the thing which is fundamentally redefining the human being, right? They're trying to redefine the human being, trying to rewire our brains, right? To accept the idea that a man who thinks he's a woman is actually a woman. And if you don't say that, then you're going to be punished in some way, right? So that's why the concern is there, right? And also because piety is so strongly connected with the sexual appetite, right? That you have to have control over your sexual appetite and even your normal sort of your fundamental, your carnal appetites, that if you don't have control over them and have no temperance, you don't have discipline, right? Then you can't be referred to as a pious person, right? The Prophet ﷺ said what? He said, if you safeguard for me what is between those 2 jaws and between those 2 thighs, I safeguard for you the paradise, right? So that's why, and it's always going to be the case, right?
No, but I do think that we should be careful not to fall into the same error that I think the Catholic community has fallen into. I was talking to a colleague here at the Catholic Theological Union here in Chicago, and I was saying, why does the Catholic community have this just inordinate concern with abortion? Other issues of the value of human life are not treated with the same immediacy as. So you have people that'll be anti-abortion and pro-capital punishment. I was thinking, for me, that's very hard to kind of reconcile.
Well,
people that are anti-abortion and pro-war. Now, I'm a Muslim. That's not my set of values. I'm not really dealing with that. But there is some dissonance there, and I was asking him about this.
I don't really think that. I don't really think there's a dissonance at all. I think that just people who themselves have not really engaged the high level of philosophical treatment of these issues are just not aware of the gravity of these issues that these issues have, right? On the human species overall, right? Because for one, if we coming back to homosexuality and transgenderism, and in particular transgenderism being the greater threat, of those two, in that our our religion, our theology is not or cannot be what it is without being rooted in biological reality, right? That there's an inseparable connection between us acknowledging our biological reality and even in our theological ideas, right? That, or our doctrines that we have, right? And the question of abortion, it starts at the most fundamental level with respect to whether or not a human being has the right to live, right? Now, of course, you can see if a person commits a crime, if you murder someone, we can say, okay, this individual is been meted out justice, right? Because they took someone else's life, right? And justice has to be fulfilled. But when you're talking about a soul which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now set in motion or set on a path into entrance into this realm, and he is at Muhyi and he is at Mumid, right? And then one decides that, you know what, I am going to play the role of God, and I'm going to decide that this particular life cannot enter into this realm, right? And Allah gives you the power to do that, right? The physical power, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he approves of it, right? That is a fundamental question. What type of value does human life have, right? I can argue with respect to, the criminal, and he committed a crime.
I
Right?
I just gave two examples about capital punishment or warfare, but we could talk about anything from poverty to wealth disparity to, the American criminal justice system. My point is simply this. Whenever those issues are addressed, these are issues that the language we use is the language of political expediency, as you were demonstrating. It's about this. But when we talk about abortion,
right, and that's both sides. But that's on both sides. Not only the Republicans is political expediency. It's both sides, right?
So when I asked this to this Catholic colleague, he said, now this was his response, and I do think that I would probably classify him as being more liberal, but I thought that his response was illuminating. He said, well, Muslims, and he's a scholar of Islam and Christianity, comparative religion. He said Muslims have a word for when anything is elevated to the position that only God should occupy. Muslims call that shirk. Catholics don't have a word for that. Right? Catholics don't have a word for that. So he felt that the way that his community was treating the issue of abortion was inconsistent with what it meant to worship God and only God exclusively. And so what I worry about as a Muslim is that I agree with you. I do think that homosexuality, I do think that transsexuality, these are, to use a fancy term, the shibboleths of our time. This is, when you think about being on the wrong side or the right side, and thank God I think I'm on the wrong side of history, usually the litmus test involves those questions, maybe some questions of gender, right? Of particularly femininity, maybe some questions of race, right? But as a Muslim, I believe in a holistic set of values, a complete set of prescriptive values for human beings that cannot just be reduced to who a person is.
And I agree.
And how they express their gender. But sometimes I think our political alignment really just comes down to those two issues.
No, I think you're misapprehending.
Go ahead.
I think there's a misapprehension, right, that's happening here, because this is not about a hyper concern for what people do in their bedrooms, right? Even when it comes to heterosexual, the sex, right? Of course, that's wrong as well, right? For Muslims, right?
Of course.
Public indecency is an issue, right, for us, right? Of all sorts. But there's a difference between, a person deciding that in a free society, in a secular society, that, listen, I'm going to lie down with the person of the same sex. Okay. And I'm going to announce that. Okay, no problem. Go ahead and announce it, right? But when you take it to another level, and then now you start to say that unless you accept this as a legitimate marriage, unless you accept this as a good and virtuous thing or act, then you are going to be blacklisted. You're going to be denied privileges. You understand? That's a totally different level. So that in itself demands an additional concern for those things, right? So as long as there are people attempting to impose their ideas upon you, that it requires a response. In the same way that fighting and warfare also should not be made like a the most important tenet of Islam, right? Right. However, if the enemy is at the gates, right? If he's at the borders, right? And he's raiding and he's invading your land. What do? You stand up and you fight. You stand up and you fight, right? So that in itself, there's a difference between you responding or reacting to an assault. But you're deciding that, listen, the only thing that's important is the wudu. The only thing that's important is salah. The only thing that's important is understand.
But do you worry that this is a bit of an overreaction?
I don't think it's overreaction at all, right? I think it's a mistake.
This is still a
mistake on your part and other people's parts to believe that this is not a significant or serious issue. Right.
Well, I think you living in Oakland and close to, and me living in Chicago and people that live in New York City, I think our perception of the importance of the issue is a lot different than somebody living in Oklahoma. Somebody living in Kansas.
Yeah, but that person living in Oklahoma still has good reason to have that concern, right? So because it's not a concern in your area doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a concern in other people's area, right? Because so it sounds like you're saying that because it's no big deal here. It shouldn't be a big deal for you, right?
I'm not saying that, right? And you have people chiming in the chat. Sister Tricia, Sister Jihan, and I think agree with you, and they've spoken very clearly, and I get that. Sister Jihan said that what you're mentioning is closely approaching an emergency situation that requires political expediency. But is it something that we should reduce? Meaning, like when I'm thinking about my values as a Muslim, do I want to step into that cultural vortex where it's just gay, it's transgenderism, homosexuality? Where do you stand on those issues? This determines your political allegiance and alliance. It's like, wait, hold on, I'm Muslim.
Yeah, but that's what they're doing. That's what they're demanding of you, right? And so what are you going to do when they step to you and they say, "Hey, you got to make a choice"? What's your position? What's your position?
You had kafirun.
Okay, all right. You already stayed there. You're blacklisted. Promotion for you, right? So what's next?
No. In this, so all I'm saying is that can we craft an expression of Muslim engagement with the world around us, even calling it political?
Of course.
That is not just responding to the American status quo, but is really truly representative of our values, a Quranic-based view of the world. And yes, we may find ourselves agreeing with conservatives on certain points. I think on the issue of family values, on the issue of sexual decency, on the issue of free enterprise, if we're really going to be honest, we will find ourselves agreeing with conservatives.
Right.
But on the issue of respecting the inherent human dignity that people have, man.
What? But again,
and returning sexuality to the private realm of human beings.
Yeah, good luck with that.
In the sense that, like, as a Muslim, I find it disquieting that I engage people on the basis of what they do in their bedrooms. That there's something about that.
But who started that? Did we start there or did they start that?
That's not us. That's not us.
Right? Yeah, but when they demand from you to take a position, what do? You can't just be quiet. What are you going to do? Yeah, they tell you that in order for you to receive this perquisite, you have to make your position clear, right? I mean, this is exactly what's happening with Muslims in politics. They gotta take a position. You can't just, I'm a member of the Democrat Party, but I don't believe that gay marriage is valid from the Sharia standpoint, or to say that I don't believe that a man who says he's a woman is actually a woman, right? What type of trouble is that going to get you into? And you can't remain silent. They don't allow for you to remain silent about it. You can't just say, "Well,
I guess what I'm saying is there a way to shift? See, what worries me about even some of the discussion that we've had this evening is that I still think we're not shifting the paradigm. We're just speaking as two Muslims that have a background that have backgrounds in Islamic studies about the existing paradigm, and we're kind of pushing some thoughts to and fro. But is it our job to shift the paradigm?
Yes, it is. It is our job to shift the paradigm. But with the paradigm, but it has to start. We can only shift the paradigm within the sphere of our influence. Right? You understand? But if we don't have the influence and the power, like these big, again, coming back to the media once again, right? Coming back to the academy once again, right? We don't have the same level of influence. So if Muslims themselves are confused, right, and we're not providing clarity, moral clarity for Muslims first and foremost, then what type of change or shift of the paradigm is even possible, right? If we're afraid to actually even deal with the topic, we're not courageous enough to deal with the topic, how do we hope to change any public perception about these things, right? It just remain silent and say, hey, no, that's, we're not affected by this.
We're not affected by it. I totally concur with Sister Jihan Hakeem. We're affected by this. I mean, it's not something that we can afford to ignore. I'm just concerned that I'm participating in a conversation for which I did not set the terms. And even though I'm saying what I truly believe in, it's not representative of the whole of my worldview. You understand what I'm saying? Meaning like, I mean, yes, homosexuality is wrong. Fornication is wrong. See, if I was in control of this conversation, this would be about sexual anarchy. It would be about, this is an aspect of human life that must be engaged according to the dictates of the creator of human life.
Yeah, indeed.
And I don't hold out in that any special disdain for this sin. Or now there's ishmizaz, there's personal disgust, yes, but as far as my values, this is wrong and this is wrong, and what my community represents is an alternative to this and that.
Yeah, but I think I think that's a bit of a distortion too, because there's no moral equivalency between these things as well, right? They're all immoral, yes, but homosexual sex or sodomy is worse than fornication, right?
Wait, hold on. They're kaba'ir.
Right. They're kaba'ir, no, but the kaba'ir, they're not all equal. Shirk is worse than anything else, right? Sure. So there's a hierarchy when it comes to kaba'ir, right?
Okay, this just became Azhar versus Karawiyin now.
Let's do it.
On what basis are you saying that it's worse than adultery, for instance? Which is also
it's worse because it leads to the end of the human species, right? It doesn't open up the door to the possibility of life, right? So whereas fornication at least opens up the door to the possibility of life, even if we say that the fact that these two people are not married is a bad thing, right? When it comes to homosexuality, now when man lies down with a man, a woman lies down with a woman, now the possibility, right, of life is not even available anymore. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to live. He wants us to have offspring. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called us to do so as well, right? So there's, again, and then it's a perversion. It's also a perversion of human nature as well, right? And on top of that, and then thirdly, there are certain harms, physical harms that result from sodomy, right? Anyone who is a nurse or works in the ER, who has had a visit by an individual who had, suffered injury due to sodomy knows this to be a reality, right? There's certain things that result from it. So there's no moral equivalency between the two, right? And
well, can we at the very least say that all fornication, adultery, sodomy, these are all outlawed, harmful forms?
Sure, you can say that, of course, right? You can always say that, a person who kills one person compared to someone who killed 10 is not the same, right? You understand?
But I think when we talk exclusively about homosexuality, I don't think that is the moral. That's reflective of the moral vocabulary of Islam. It's not like in the sense that for us, it's not simply that this is unnatural or some other naturalistic argument. It's that it goes against what God said.
That's our starting point. That's our starting point. But
I think that's the only point.
No,
I don't place much time.
Unless you're just a zahiri, right? Of course you're a literalist. I guess maybe you don't do qiyas, and you don't believe in hikam and ilal, that wisdoms that Allah reveals to people, that things are and things have like racial legals.
The source of their hurma is the fact that God has made them forbidden. That's
true. Okay, it starts there. Of course, it starts there. But that doesn't mean that there are not some wisdom that we learn through the process of the prohibition, right? So or that there's not some rational, potentially rational foundation upon which you can actually build, right, the prohibition, right? There are. We're believers, right? We do what Allah asked of us, and we avoid what Allah tells us to avoid, right? However, right, this idea that the judgments, God's judgments, the divine judgments, have no, there's no wisdom, right? That there's no the rational sort of like explanation at times. And of course, we can't explain everything, but it's.
Dr. Abdullah, and this is my point. Yeah. Because we enter the discourse, we don't get to set the terms for the conversation. We're engaging on the basis of public reason, which, of course, is just these naturalistic arguments about what's natural.
No, we're not. No, we're not engaging on the basis of public reason because again, it's not them dictating anything because we're reacting to them trying to dictate it to us. And our starting point is Quran and Sunnah. And we start there, and then, but the foundation upon which we find common ground is reason, is aql. They don't believe in our book. They don't believe in our book, right? But if they want us to understand, okay, well, if they want us to make an argument that does not rely upon our holy book, right? The only thing we can do is argue with them on the basis of natural law, right?
But see, I guess my only rebuttal would be, if that's the case, given the system of values that you've just elucidated, why aren't we more aggrieved by shirk than homosexuality?
Well, we are. Who said we're not more aggrieved by shirk? Right? Who said we're not?
No, it seems to me that our political allegiances, our cultural allegiances, they take homosexuality into consideration.
I think we're working with a lot of too many assumptions, that you haven't questioned, enough, because it's like
this is not our conversation. That's my point.
Right.
Not having our conversation.
No, I don't think. I think it is our conversation because they make it our conversation. If they weren't demanding from us to accept, then we wouldn't have any reason to talk about it. Right, but the fact that we are talking about it is because they are demanding that we take a position on it, right?
No, respect.
Like I said before, like if they were telling us that as Muslims you can no longer believe in Allah and you have to believe in Lat wal Uzza and Manat, right? then we'll be talking about that. We will be reacting and we will be resisting that as well, right? But again, it's like you're making it seem as if like, okay, a bunch of us got together and say, hey, man, we don't like these homosexual people and we need to do something about them. Then we're going to jump on start writing.
I just fear that status that, and this is particularly relevant, I think, to African-American Muslim communities, maybe more so than other Muslim communities, but I think it's useful for other Muslim communities. Islam, we should be wary of, we should seek relevance, but we should be wary of entering conversations and just participating.
I would agree. Okay, if you are not qualified to enter into the conversation, if you don't feel adequate or fit enough to enter the conversation, don't enter the conversation, right?
But what
I'm adequate, we have every right to enter the conversation.
I guess what it's like, قال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام الكفر نظام واحد, that kufr or disbelief in God, it's a system. It's a comprehensive system. And I think when we engage these pitch battles about homosexuality, transgenderism, we're never really able to talk about a completely different alternative in terms of.
I disagree with you. I think that you're oversimplifying something which is very nuanced, right? When it comes to these issues, it's not as simple as that, and even the hadith itself is in, the authenticity of the hadith you quoted is even in question. For that very reason, there's khilaf among the ulama about whether or not kufr is millah wahid or milal. So, but this is an issue. Again, like if we were to come back to the original conversation about conservatism and Muslims, right? Some of the basic points that, again, I generally like to make is that about myself, that my decision to look deeper into conservative values, certain political values and arguments had very much to do with my curiosity to understand why people would actually vote for Trump, to believe it or not. And that led me to a world, right, of nuance, right? It made me realize a whole lot of different things related to my own sort of default, my own default progressive ideas, right? When me thinking that I'm okay, that I'm conservative, me thinking that that I'm actually basically carrying on the legacy of our great leaders like Malcolm and Martin and others like that, and then come to the realization that I actually wasn't, right? That I actually haven't been doing that. And actually, when I look deeper into the writings and the speeches of those great men, I come to find, okay, well, it's definitely not what I find on the left. Definitely not that, right? And it's not to say that Malcolm and Martin and others, like them, actually are like Anbiya. They're not prophets, right? In the sense that, that we would treat like Muhammad alayhi salam and Ibrahim and Musa alayhi salatu salam, but they were people of deep insight, and those insights are still applicable today. Insights about the media, insights about the white liberal, right? That Malcolm talked about, right? That those insights cannot be forgotten. We cannot let go of those, right? And so in politics, there are no permanent friends or enemies. There are only permanent interests. That's it. This is the way that the non-Muslims operate. There are no permanent friends or enemies. There are permanent interests. It's just as like today, the left claims to be friends of Muslims. Tomorrow they'll flip on a dime. They'll flip like just tomorrow. They start a new war. They want to reinvade in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden, in the media, everybody's going to be attacking the Muslims again, right? It's not. It's like Beit al-Ankabut, right? Like in the Quran talks about the spider's web, right? It's in the Ohun al-Buyuti, la Beit al-Ankabut, that the weakest of all homes is the the spider's web, right? And that's fundamentally I see how things work in politics, right? But today, I see a more reliable alliance, or at least a more reliable way to preserve my values is through the Republican side. Yeah. Now, again, Republican establishment is not the same thing as the populace, right? The Republican populace, the Republican, voters themselves, right? The establishment, there are a lot of people, neocons in there. And when it comes to actually the neocons, there's not much difference between them and the Democratic establishment, right? That they're all on the same page. They try to make it seem as if like they're two different parties, right?
Yeah, privatization of government and pro-war.
Right, exactly. So we call the neoliberal politics, right? So it's crony system. You see it even when it comes to the issues related to like this whole vaccine stuff and everything. There's a lot of cronyism that's happening. FDA people going to Pfizer people going to FDA. You see all of this mess happening, right? So Pfizer, they're sort of supporting all these different news stations, and they're the sponsors. At any rate, I want to take it in that direction, but fundamentally, I think that that Muslims, that if we truly are concerned about our values, right, then we would consider listening at least to what other people have to say, right?
I just want to leave people with this, man. Mm-hmm. I've always respected you. I've always regarded your views as thoughtful, and I've never thought of you as in any way shirking. No pun intended. Muslims shouldn't shirk anything, but shirking your allegiance to the Muslim community or the Black community, or no. I've always found it inspiring on a personal level that you've decided to tread a path less trod. Where I think I've differed, and this is what I was trying to express effectively over the course of the last 20 minutes, is that I think there's a more effective, independent, countervailing way to discuss those values without aligning with right or left.
No, you don't have to. You don't. Again,
and I think, and when you align with either side, I think yes, you do get the benefit of some relevance, some immediacy. You get the benefit of some support, and believing that okay, now I'm a part of a critical mass that can actually affect some kind of change. But I think the disadvantages is that all of their baggage that comes from their particular religious and cultural history, you just have to assume that. And I think that I would like to see Islam with an opportunity to hone its own political voice with regard to these issues. And I do think even that places where we will be similar to progressives, I think it will be the intonation, the tenor will be different. In places that we find similarity with conservatives, I think the intonation, the tenor will also be different.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say to you that the moment you find that group that actually is doing it, I'll be willing to join it. But no such group exists. And so what happens and what will happen and continue to happen is people will default to the particular group that they feel they guard their interests, right? And I don't believe that the left is guarding Muslim interests. All that's happening is that they're making us feel good about ourselves. They're making us feel that we're not under attack, while at the same time they're undermining all of our values. Whereas on the right and everything, they're at least arguing for principles which would protect our values. And of course, nothing, none of it's perfect, right? And what I sense often, when I hear like people talk this way is that it's somewhat of it's sort of like a resistance, resisting the facts, which are that Again, resisting the fact that, for all of the evil that we claim or believe it originates from the right, it actually is originated from the left. Because as I stated, multiple times, is that, if we focus on the Black American community, that again, all the inner city and the condition of the inner cities, that's not been caused by Republicans. They've been ruled by, I won't say completely not caused, but I say rather they're not being governed by Republicans. That these cities, the inner cities, have been in this condition for decades now, and they've been under Democrat rule. And so when we complain about things not being better, we can't say, oh, it's because Republicans they wanted to put an end to welfare. Right? No. It ain't just welfare. It's a whole lot of other stuff. And and until we come to that realization that there's some personal responsibility issues here, but also is a systemic problem, which actually it comes from the party that we find ourselves aligned with, right, by default, right? And so because we've been indoctrinated into believing that everything on the other side is completely bad, that we're uneasy and unwilling to actually even give serious consideration to it. And again, lastly, I'll say is, like I said, listen, I'm not a political person, right? In the sense that, I don't believe that our salvation will ever come through politics. There are no messiahs that you're going to find in politics, right? But then this is just simply about, you doing what you feel is necessary to protect your interests. So if people are demanding certain things of us, right? They say, no, I don't want to conform to that. And then the other side is saying, no, you're not, we're not going to demand that of you. I say, okay, no problem. I'm going to go with the side that I feel is going to protect my interests. And so it's all reactionary. Everything that we're doing is reactions to things. As stated before, Muslims at one time didn't want to have anything to do with politics. Now we've delved into politics and we've been very sloppy. Of course we learn, but it may be too late by the time we actually kind of, get things right. But, I believe in nuance. I don't believe in black or white, but this is fundamentally just, I would say, is a message that I would just leave.
My favorite comment of the evening, and we'll leave it here from my big brother here in Chicago. Thomas Musa McGuire said, "We need to accept and embrace our centrism, man. On a lot of these issues, we're not, we're not, we have to, it's like I think the center, even though that's where we aspire to be, people of the Sunnah of Muhammad alayhi salam, it is a very lonely place because, when you're in the center, you can say, yes, I agree with that, but not everything that you said. And yes, I agree with some of the things you said, but not everything that you said. Right. And I think that this is perhaps a good place for us, a good point of departure for us to really begin crafting, some civic mindedness and some political thought.
Right. Yeah.
So I do thank you for joining me this evening.
One last thing I say to you, I'm sorry. You should read my piece, a new political vision for Muslim America. If you haven't already read that, because a lot of the ideas that I express here, I expressed in that particular piece, and this is before Biden became the president, right? This is something back I wrote in the 2019. So I put my ideas out. Right. And I've been waiting for people to respond. Right. But is it the reaction has been, okay, no, that guy, he's just a right winger. And, so we don't want to hear anything from that side, because we hate those people. They hate us. And so we don't want to hear.
I mean, we have to resist that kind of very simplistic polarization in our discourse and just listen to people, man. I appreciate you coming on today and speaking about your views, and as I think is apparent, there's a lot of things upon which we completely agree. I do think that preserving that non-domestication of faith, I think is just very important, right? So I would be reluctant to be a mainstream anything in terms of ideas. Me personally, I would be reluctant to claim such a title. At the same time, I understand like what Sister Jihan and I referenced her many times this evening, was saying about we're trying to protect our children and we're trying to protect our values. Any group that we can align with that will help us to do that, we should be willing to align with them. So, I understand that kind of very pragmatic, very immediate kind of solidarity as well. But I do think that one of the strengths of Islam in America traditionally is that we've always had our own lane. Right. Always had our own lane, and I think that we have to continue, pursuing our own lane. So,
inshallah.
Please, balligh salamana ila ahlik. Convey our salam to your family.
Inshallah.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I know people probably were expecting an explosive boxing match. They didn't know that every time I have a question in fiqh, I call you. So I can't get on and excoriate you and then call you and say, I got this question about inheritance. So sorry, guys. I had to play nice. I actually have tremendous respect for this man and regard him.
Alhamdulillah.
Barakallahu feekum. We'll see you soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum.
Aisha, I think you're on mute.
All right. Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank Ustadh Ubaydullah and Dr. Abdullah again for that engaging discussion and for all the viewers engaging in the comments and sharing their views. And we wanted to remind you about the ALIM summer program. It will be held this summer from July 16th to August 7th. And registration is live now. Go to alimprogram.org, inshallah, to register for the summer program. And we thank you all for joining us this evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.